Hey everyone, uh, thanks for joining me today. My name is John Zackerson. Today in this little video, we're going to be reviewing my final research proposal paper that we did for the course AIL 690 in instructional technology. Glad to be here today, so thanks for joining me. We're going to talk about my paper. It's called Learning Theories as Process Designs. It's a literature synthesis with a continuous improvement lens. So thanks for being here. Oops, I already made one mistake. No, I'm just kidding. Uh, all right, let me start with an overview. Let's what we want to discuss here today. We'll start with some background and rationale of the paper. We'll look at the purpose and our research questions. We'll talk about the theoretical background. We'll spend some time on our methodological approach we wanted to take. We'll look at the key findings. That is, we tried to answer a couple of key research questions. We'll look at the expected results and implications. And then finally, we'll finish with limitations and future directions for this kind of study. Okay, so the key question really is of the paper is, and that I argue is that why should we really look at learning theories as process designs? That's what we tried to get at in this paper. Why do we want to do that? What's the advantage of doing that? And I argue that in instructional technology, discussions often center on the tools that we use. So you can look at learning management systems, multimedia, AI, analytics, whatever you want. But the point is that technology alone doesn't guarantee meaningful learning. And I think what really matters is the process we design around those tools. The sequence of activities, the feedback loops, the roles of learners and instructors, and how those processes are refined over time. Because if we can look at this learning as a process, that the process can be improved, and we want to improve our learning as we go. So the rationale of this study really is to look at the learning theories that were especially useful when we interpret them as process designs, as patterns of tasks, feedback, and interaction that can be implemented and improved. And at the same time, improvement science and lean thinking emphasize standard work, data, plan, do, study, act cycles, or you'll see that as PDSA cycles. And we want to bring these two worlds together. Learning theory and continuous improvement can help. If we do in fact bring these together, we can help instructional technologists design processes that are effective, efficient, and therefore systematically improvable. That's the whole point. Okay, so what is the purpose and the research questions? The purpose of the study is really twofold. So first, I synthesize literature on our four foundational learning perspectives that we learned in the course. So that's behaviorism, cognitivism, constructivism, and constructionism. And we try to treat each of these as process designs for learning, especially in technology mediated environments. Second, I want to bring in a continuous improvement lens to ask how those processes can be measured, refined, and kind of hybridized in practice. So this work was really guided by three research questions. Research question one asks how each theory conceptualizes learning and how those conceptions translate into instructional processes in technology enhanced contexts. Research question two examines how the patterns of learning outcomes, learner experiences, and efficiency associated with theory aligned designs, and how these patterns are moderated by context. So, for example, learner prior knowledge or subject matter. And then Uh, Finally, research question 3 asks how we can use continuous improvement ideas, such as PDSA cycles and standard work and other things, how that can inform the design, implementation, and the ongoing adjustment of these theory-aligned learning processes so that we can improve them. Okay, the background, let's talk a little bit about the theoretical background for the study. And it includes the 4 familiar learning theories, plus kind of a fifth one that's the improvement science that I wanted to bring in. So first of all, just as a matter of review, of course, everyone knows, I mean, I'm sure you all know that behaviorism views learning as changes in observable behavior. That's the whole point. So these are kind of uh, direct instruction and mastery learning. Those are kind of the key concepts there. Cognitivism kind of shifts the focus to internal information processing. So, how do learners encode, store, and retrieve information? Constructivism emphasizes that learners actively construct knowledge through engagement with meaningful problems, collaboration, and reflection. Also important there is problem-based and project-based learning um, are very important for those processes. And then constructionism builds kind of it builds on constructivism, kind of hard to say, but centers learning around kind of creating those artifacts, those learning artifacts, like whatever you want, like programs, games, models, anything like that can be considered a learning artifact. And then finally, improvement science and lean introduce tools like PDSA cycles and standard work, which focus on making processes explicit, measuring their performance, and refining them over time. The project really focused on literature synthesis rather than a full systematic review. So the goal was not to capture every possible study, but to develop kind of coherence theory process framework using um, influential and representative sources. So to do this, I drew on scoping review frameworks. First, I identified foundational sources and cross-theory comparisons for behaviorism, cognitivism, constructivism, and constructionism. Second, I selected key meta-analysis and representative empirical or design-based studies that examine outcomes of theory-aligned process designs, along with cross-cutting on feedback and improvement science. Third, I coded each source for how learning processes were structured, what outcomes were measured, and any explicit or implicit use of continuous improvement ideas. Together, these steps supported the development of what I call a theory process fit framework that characterizes each perspective in terms of structure, learner agency, feedback loops, and the typical outcomes we would expect to see. Okay, so let's kind of focus on the research questions now. So turning to research question 1, I ask, how do the 4 theories translate into characteristic and instructional processes? So for behaviorism, the literature consistently describes highly structured sequences, such as direct instruction with scripted prompts, choral responses, brisk pacing, and continuous monitoring. For cognitivism, the process design focuses on how information is sequenced and represented. Examples could include starting with advanced organizers that activate prior knowledge, presenting content in logically structured segments, and following multimedia principles like coherence, signaling, segmenting to manage cognitive load. Constructivist designs organize learning around complex but often ill structured problems or projects. And so learners cycle through confronting the problem, identifying knowledge gaps, engaging in self-directed study, sharing knowledge with their peers, and applying what they've learned. In constructionism, learning processes revolve around creating that artifact that we talked about before. That's really important to the learner. The typical cycle we see involves imagining a project, designing and building it, testing and debugging, sharing it with others, and then iterating based on the feedback that we receive. And these processes tend to be more open-ended and personalized than the behaviorist processes or the behaviorist or cognitive processes. Research question number 2 looks at outcomes, trade-offs, and contextual moderators associated with each process family. So here we see that the meta-analysis of the behaviorism or direct instruction show moderate to large positive effects on achievement across subjects and grade levels, with especially strong benefits for disadvantaged learners when the programs are implemented with fidelity. For cognitivist designs informed by multimedia learning and cognitive load theory, studies show improved comprehension and transfer when principles like coherence, signaling, and segmenting are applied. And so these processes improve efficiency by aligning instruction with kind of our human limits. In constructivist problem-based and project-based learning, findings are a little more nuanced. These designs often yield equal or better long-term retention and problem-solving performance compared to traditional instruction. But on the other hand, they can underperform on short-term tasks or tests, especially when problems are very open-ended or learners have limited prior knowledge. Finally, constructionist environments, particularly in coding, tend to show high engagement, persistence, and development of computational thinking and design skills. However, they are harder to standardize and evaluate using our conventional tests. Across all these, the point here is to say that context matters. Learner prior knowledge, subject domain, project duration, and assessment type all moderate the observed outcomes. Research question 3 asks how a continuous improvement lens can inform these theory-based processes. So improvement science really frames practice as a series of processes that can be systematically studied and refined using our PDSA cycle that we talked about. And this aligns with the lean concepts of standard work and waste reduction and other kinds of things that you'll see in lean. So in behaviorist and cognitivist designs, processes are already kind of well suited for that application. They're already highly structured, which makes it easy to collect data like item level errors, response times, mastery rates, or drop points in videos if you have a video they're watching or whatever. And so PDSA cycles can then be used to test small changes, adjusting item difficulty, reordering work practice examples, or modifying multimedia elements to reduce extraneous load. So they're already kind of well set, and we like that, or I like that. In constructivist and constructionist environments, processes are a little more emergent. But the logic, I argue, of continuous improvement still applies. And design-based research is an example. researchers and practitioners iteratively refine tasks, um, scaffolds, tools, and classroom norms using data from successive implementations. Instructional, and I really think that instructional technology can support this work by providing analytics on participation and other kinds of things. So across these theories, the key message is that when we make process designs explicit and visible, we can deliberately test, adapt, and improve them over time. And that's really the whole point of this little study. We've got to think of these as processes so that we can improve them. All right, let's see. Let's talk a little bit about the theory process fit framework. And you can see kind of from that graph there what I'm trying to get at is that you kind of put all these findings together. The paper kind of proposes this theory process fit framework. So it's like rather than asking which theory is best in the abstract, this framework looks at dimensions along which process designs vary. Important dimensions include the degree of structure versus learner autonomy, um, the locus of control, that is, whether the teacher or the system drives the process versus the learner, the nature of tasks involved, and the type of feedback emphasized. And this framework helps instructional technologists reason about fit. So, for example, when a highly structured process is appropriate for foundational skill acquisition, and when more open uh, constructionist processes are appropriate for advanced application or creativity. It also supports designing hybrid sequences. So you could start with a behaviorist or cognitivist routine, and then to kind of secure that foundational knowledge, and then you could move into a constructivist or constructionist projects for transfer and innovation. Okay, the expected results and the contributions we want to see. I just want to make a note that although this work is framed as a literature synthesis, we can still talk about expected results and contributions in terms of what the framework enables. First, the synthesis clarifies each learning theory as a repeatable process design, and that's the most important thing we can get, rather than just a kind of set of ideas in the abstract. And this supports more concrete conversations in design teams. So, like, what does a behaviorist or a constructivist process actually look like in a course or a module? It's an important question to answer. Second, it surfaces the trade-offs. There's always going to be trade-offs across these designs, especially between effectiveness, efficiency, and learner agency. And we can see that structured behaviorist and cognitivist processes tend to be more efficient and predictable, while constructivist and constructionist processes tend to foster deeper understanding and creativity. But on the other hand, can be less efficient and more variable. Third, the study shows how continuous improvement concepts can structure design decisions. So instead of choosing a theory kind of once and for all, teams can define a process explicitly, measure how it performs, and then use PDSA cycles to adjust the process over time. Hopefully, the point is you're getting better over time. Finally, I argue that the framework offers a practical lens for instructional technology designers who need to select and blend processes in ways that fit their learners and the content and the constraints. The paper highlights several implications for instructional design, technology design. First, and maybe most important to me, is that the designers should treat the learning theories as toolkits and not dogmas. So behaviorist processes may be ideal for that initial skill acquisition. Cognitivist principles should inform multimedia explanations and practice. Constructivist and constructionist processes can shape collaborative inquiry and project-based work, especially at more advanced levels. Second, uh, educational technology should be, and this is key, I think, for what I argue is that we really should configure each of these systems to capture process data. For example, you could capture time on task, uh, error patterns, participation in discussions, and all the things like that. If you can set these systems up to capture data, you can use the data in some way, and hopefully you're using that data to improve. And then third, the framework invites us to think about equity. Evidence we know suggests that well-designed direct instruction or behaviorist and mastery learning can benefit students by providing good structure and multiple chances for mastery. On the other hand, open-ended constructivist or constructionist environments can unintentionally widen gaps if learners lack a particular set of prior knowledge. Building in scaffolds and monitoring uh, variation in outcomes becomes very, very important. Overall, the implication is that instructional technology is not just about selecting the tools, it's about designing, measuring, and refining theory-informed processes that balance effectiveness, efficiency, learner agency, and equity. Okay, the synthesis does have several limitations. The literature sample obviously is selected and selective and focuses mainly on our four established perspectives that we talked about in the class, but it doesn't really give any attention to any emerging frameworks. So we don't touch on that. In addition, most of the outcome evidence summarized comes from relatively conventional achievement and attitude measures. We still know less about how different process designs influence long-term outcomes. Um, so that's important to note. And then finally, the integration of continuous improvement and theory-informed design remains under-theorized. So I think there is a need for more explicit work on how PDSA cycles can be structured around theory-based hypotheses and process outcome relationships, and how learning analytics environments can operate kind of as test beds for innovation. So we know that future research could extend our theory process framework to additional perspectives and use mixed methods and longitudinal designs to better understand how learners experience and benefit from different process designs over time. To conclude here, the study argues that behaviorism, cognitivism, constructivism, and constructionism can be productively understood as process designs for learning, each with characteristic strengths, trade-offs, and contextual affordances. Um, and that's the idea. Behaviorist and cognitivist designs often offer structured, efficient paths to foundational knowledge and skills. Constructivist and constructionist designs support deeper understanding through inquiry. And then a continuous improvement lens provides a way to investigate these perspectives in practice. Rather than choosing a single theory, instructional technologists can design hybrid processes, measure how they perform for different learners, and iteratively improve them. And that's what I'm excited about. Ultimately, the central task is not just to pick the right platform or even the right theory. Really, what you want to do is to design and refine processes that fit our learners using theory as our guide and improvement science as a method. And that's what I wanted to say here today. And that kind of concludes what we've got. Um, So thank you very much for watching and listening to this. If you have any questions, please reach out. Thanks.